Welcome, everyone. Today we're exploring one of ancient Rome's most, let's say, infamous figures, Emperor Nero. His name instantly brings up images of tyranny, wild excess, maybe even fiddling while Rome burned.
Right, he's become this sort of caricature of a mad emperor, but when you actually look at the historical material, the picture gets, well, a lot more complicated.
That's what we want to get into today, unpacking that reputation, looking beyond the simple villain narrative. Because the evidence we have, it's often contradictory, isn't it?
Incredibly so. Our main sources, Tacitus, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, they were all writing after Nero's death, often with their own political biases, sometimes decades or even centuries later. So piecing together the real Nero is quite the challenge. It's like historical detective work.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. He wasn't born Nero, was he?
No, he was born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus back in AD 37 in Antium.
And his father, Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus. Well, Suetonius didn't exactly paint a flattering picture, calls him irascible and brutal.
That's putting it mildly. Suetonius even includes this rather chilling alleged quote from the father, saying any child he had with Nero's mother, Agrippina, would be a public danger.
Wow. Talk about setting expectations low, almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy waiting to happen.
It's certainly an ominous start. And then his father dies when Nero is only 3.
Which leaves him with his mother, Agrippina the Younger. And she seems like a force of nature in her own right. She eventually marries the Emperor Claudius.
She does in AD 49, and this is absolutely pivotal because just a year later, in AD 50, Claudius adopts young Lucius. He's renamed Nero Claudius Caesar Drusus Germanicus and, crucially, designated as Claudius's heir.
Suddenly he's on the fast track to the throne.
And Agrippina was the driving force behind that. You really can't overstate her ambition or her strategic maneuvering.
How so? What did she do?
Well, she systematically worked to secure Nero's position. She had Claudius's own son, Britannicus's tutors, replaced with people loyal to her and Nero. She did the same with the prefects, the commanders of the Praetorian Guard.
The emperor's bodyguards.
A huge deal. They were major political players. By controlling them, she essentially guaranteed a smooth transition for Nero when Claudius died in AD 54.
And there are whispers about Claudius's death, too, aren't there? Poison?
Ancient sources certainly make that claim, pointing the finger squarely at Agrippina. Modern historians, though, are a bit more cautious. The accounts differ, there's no hard proof. But, well, it certainly served her interests, didn't it?
It did. So Nero becomes emperor. He's only 16. You'd expect chaos, maybe.
You might, but initially it was quite the opposite. His tutor was Seneca the Younger, the famous Stoic philosopher, and Seneca helped him draft his first speech to the Senate. In it, Nero promised to rule like Augustus, the revered first emperor. He promised to end secret trials, root out corruption at court, and respect the Senate's traditional privileges.
That must have gone down well.
Extremely well. It earned him a lot of praise initially. It seemed like a new era of good governance might be dawning.
And this early period, it even got a name, right?
Yes, the Quinquennium Neronis, the 5 years of Nero. Even later emperors like Trajan, who wasn't exactly a Nero fan, recognized these first 5 years as, well, a period of sound administration.
What kind of things happened during this good period?
You see some sensible fiscal reforms, like cracking down on corrupt tax collectors. He also, quite progressively for the time, allowed slaves to bring complaints against their masters directly to the authorities.
Huh. That doesn't fit the tyrant image at all.
Not remotely. It shows, I think, that even rulers who end up infamous can start by, playing the political game very effectively, appealing to different groups. It's a pattern you see throughout history, really.
So the promising start, but we know where the story eventually goes. When did things start to unravel?
The first major tension point was perhaps inevitably with his mother, Agrippina.
The one who put him on the throne.
Exactly. She clearly expected to rule through him, or at least alongside him. She started appearing on coins with him, something usually reserved just for the emperor. She was even granted 2 lictors.
Lictors. Those attendants with the bundles of rods and axes. Symbols of power.
Precisely. It was a very public assertion of authority, basically claiming co-rulership. And Nero, as he got older and more confident, began to resent this deeply.
Leading to
one of the most shocking acts of his reign, the murder of his own mother in AD 59.
How? How did that even happen?
The accounts are lurid. Suetonius describes this elaborate plot involving a specially designed collapsible boat meant to look like an accident at sea.
A shipwreck. Seriously.
Apparently so. But Agrippina, incredibly, survived the sinking ship and swam ashore. Nero then had to resort to sending assassins to finish the job.
Unbelievable. And the ancient sources, they link this to his affair with Poppaea Sabina.
They often do, suggesting Poppy pushed him towards it. Modern historians tend to be a bit skeptical about her direct role in the murder itself, partly because Nero didn't actually marry her until AD 62, 3 years later.
But the fact remains, he had his mother killed.
Undeniably. And it's often seen as a major psychological turning point. The historian Miriam T. Griffin argued that after this, Nero essentially lost all sense of right and wrong.
Were there other victims around this time? Family members?
Yes. His first wife, Claudia Octavia, Claudius' daughter, was exiled and later executed, seemingly on trumped-up charges of adultery, clearing the way for him to marry Poppaea, and his stepbrother, Britannicus, died very suddenly years earlier, likely poisoned, removing a potential rival.
So the ruthlessness was there early on. But Agrippina's death marked a shift.
It seems so. After her death, and especially after the death of Burrus, one of his key, more stabilizing advisors in AD 62, well, that's when Seneca was forced into retirement. And Nero's relationship with the Senate really deteriorated. He abandoned much of that earlier restraint.
And this is also when his famous extravagance starts to ramp up.
Oh, absolutely. He starts pouring vast sums of money into building projects. There's the Domus Transitoria, a huge palace complex. He undertakes massive rebuilding at his birthplace, Antium. The spending becomes, well, imperial in scale.
Okay, so the stage is set. Growing paranoia, extravagance, and then comes the event that truly defines his popular image. The Great Fire of Rome in AD 64.
A genuine catastrophe. It started in merchant shops near the Circus Maximus, swept through the city, fanned by winds, and burned for the better part of 10 days. 3 of Rome's 14 districts were completely wiped out, 7 others severely damaged.
And the big question, was Nero responsible?
The accounts just completely diverge here. Many Romans at the time likely thought it was just a terrible accident. Rome was a tinderbox, narrow streets, wooden buildings. Fires were common.
But then you have Suetonius.
Right. Suetonius claims Nero deliberately started it. Why? To clear land for his incredibly opulent new palace, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. This was planned to be unbelievably lavish, artificial lakes, forests, even a colossal 30-meter statue of himself.
And the story about him playing his lyre and singing while the city burned.
That's the most famous image, isn't it? Most historians now view that as almost certainly later propaganda, probably spread by the Flavian dynasty that succeeded him to blacken his name.
Because Tacitus, another key historian, tells a different story about Nero's reaction.
He does. Tacitus says Nero was actually away in Antium when the fire broke out. He apparently rushed back to Rome and organized relief efforts, opened his palaces to shelter the homeless, brought in food supplies, paid for it himself.
That sounds completely different, almost responsible.
It does. But Tacitus then adds a really dark twist.
Which is?
Tacitus reports that, to deflect the rumors that he had started the fire, Nero needed scapegoats, and he chose the Christians.
Ah, the first major Roman persecution?
Yes. Tacitus describes incredibly brutal executions. Christians were thrown to wild beasts in the arena, crucified or even coated in pitch, and burned alive as human torches to light up Nero's gardens at night.
And Tacitus's view on this?
He's quite clear. He didn't necessarily like the Christians, but he saw their persecution not as justice, but as an outlet for Nero's personal cruelty and a cynical ploy to divert blame.
And the fire had economic consequences too, right? Rebuilding Rome must have cost a fortune.
Immense sums. Nero's government had to raise funds somehow. They increased taxes, and significantly, they devalued the currency, reducing the silver content in coins. This led to inflation, a problem that would plague the empire later on.
Alongside all this political drama and disaster, Nero had this other side, his artistic passions.
He was genuinely devoted to the arts, poetry, music, painting, sculpture. He studied them all, but his real love seemed to be music and performing.
Playing the cithara, acting in tragedies.
Yes, but performing publicly. And this was the problem for the Roman elite. Acting, playing music on stage, these were considered activities for slaves, foreigners, or low-status entertainers. For an emperor to do it, it was deeply scandalous to the aristocracy.
He didn't care about their opinions, clearly.
Not in the slightest. His desire for applause seemed paramount. Look at the Olympics in AD 67.
What happened there?
Well, first he bribed the organizers to postpone the games for a year so he could participate. Then he had artistic competitions, music, poetry added just for him.
And did he win?
He won every single event he entered, including, famously, a 10-horse chariot race where he was actually thrown from the chariot and didn't even finish properly.
He still won. How?
They just crowned him anyway, as if he would have won had he finished. It perfectly illustrates how his desire for public acclaim just steamrolled everything else. Propriety, fairness, you name it.
While he's pursuing artistic glory, the empire's still running. There were military matters too, weren't there? Britain, for instance.
Yes, Britain saw a major crisis during his reign, the Boudiccan Revolt around 80, 60, or 61. Queen Boudica led a massive uprising, destroyed several Roman settlements, inflicted heavy casualties.
How did Nero handle that?
Initially, the Romans suffered serious setbacks. General Suetonius Paulinus eventually crushed the rebellion, but Tacitus reports that Nero was so rattled by the scale of the revolt that he actually considered abandoning Britain altogether.
Wow. But there were successes too. Parthia.
Yes, the eastern frontier saw a significant diplomatic achievement. General Corbulo negotiated a peace treaty with Parthia, Rome's major rival in the east, ending a long war over Armenia.
How did that work?
It was quite clever. Rome agreed to recognize the Parthian candidate, Tiridates, as king of Armenia, but Tiridates had to travel to Rome to receive his crown, his diadem, directly from Nero himself.
Acknowledging Roman dominance.
Exactly. It led to a period of pretty good relations. Nero is hailed in the East with titles like New Apollo or New Sun, but his reign also saw the start of another major conflict, the First Jewish-Roman War, which began in AD 66.
So a mixed bag militarily. Back in Rome, though, the atmosphere was becoming increasingly dangerous for Nero, wasn't it?
Definitely. The Pisonian conspiracy in AD 65 was a major one. It involved senators, knights, even the poet Lucan. It was discovered, and the crackdown was severe. Many were executed or forced to commit suicide, including Nero's old tutor, Seneca.
And more personal controversies continued. Poppia's death.
She died in AD 65. Some ancient sources sensationally claim Nero kicked her to death in a fit of rage while she was pregnant.
Is that like...
Most modern historians think it's more plausible she died from complications of pregnancy or childbirth, perhaps a miscarriage. The kicking story fits the anti-Nero narrative a bit too neatly.
And then came the marriage to Sporus.
Yes, that is, well, deeply disturbing. Sporus was a young freedman, a boy, whom Nero had castrated. Why? Reportedly because Sporus bore a striking resemblance to the deceased Poppaea.
He married him.
He did, treating Sporus publicly as his wife. The sources suggest Nero did this out of some twisted sense of regret or an attempt to, I don't know, replace Poppaea. It's hard to fathom, frankly. It speaks to a mind perhaps becoming increasingly detached from reality.
It certainly paints a picture of someone losing control.
Yeah.
And eventually, the empire turned against him for good.
Yes, in AD 68. It started with a revolt by Vindex, the governor of Gaul. Though Vindex was defeated, another governor, Galba in Spain, declared himself emperor. Support for Galba snowballed. Even Nero's own protectors, the Praetorian Guard, abandoned him.
Leaving him completely isolated.
Utterly. He fled Rome in disguise, trying to escape, but knew the end was near.
And his final moments.
They're described as rather pathetic, actually. He couldn't bring himself to commit suicide. He apparently lamented, "Qualis artifex perio." What an artist the world is losing.
Seriously. Even then.
Apparently so. Finally, he had to force his private secretary, Epaphroditus, to help him, essentially to kill him. As Roman soldiers closed in, his last words were supposedly, "Too late. This is fidelity." Perhaps referring to the approaching soldiers, or maybe a final cynical comment. He died on June 9th, AD 68.
And the anniversary of?
The death of his first wife, Octavia, whom he'd had executed years before. A grim coincidence, if it was one.
What was the immediate reaction in Rome to his death? Relief.
Among the Senate and the upper classes, yes, definitely relief, even celebration. They declared him a public enemy, ordered his statues torn down, his name erased from inscriptions, what's called damnatio memoria.
But not everyone felt that way.
No, surprisingly. Tacitus notes that the common people in Rome, the lower class slaves, those who frequented the circuses and theaters he'd patronized, they were actually upset. Some even laid flowers on his tomb.
That's fascinating. Why?
Perhaps they saw him as a patron, someone who provided entertainment, and maybe didn't oppress them directly in the way they felt the aristocracy did. It shows a real class divide in perceptions of him.
And this affection, particularly in the East, led to something quite strange, didn't it? The Nero Redivivus legend.
Yes, this persistent belief, especially strong in the eastern provinces where he'd been popular, that Nero wasn't actually dead. That he had escaped and would return, perhaps with Parthian support, to reclaim his throne.
People actually believed he'd come back.
For centuries. It's quite remarkable. There were at least 3 different individuals who actually claimed to be Nero and led unsuccessful rebellions in the years after his death. The belief was still being talked about by Christian writers like Augustine of Hippo in the early 5th century.
Wow, so his legacy was immediately contested. And his place in religious traditions is also really complex. Jewish tradition has a very unexpected take.
It does. The Talmud, a central text of Rabbinic Judaism, contains this extraordinary legend. It claims that Nero, before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in AD 70, fired arrows in all directions, and they all landed pointing towards Jerusalem. He took this as a sign God wanted the temple destroyed.
Okay.
But then the legend continues, he realized God would surely punish whoever carried out the destruction. So, according to the story, Nero fled, converted to Judaism, and his descendants even included a famous rabbi.
That's certainly not in the Roman histories.
Not at all. But it shows how different cultures try to make sense of this powerful, destructive figure, sometimes in very surprising ways.
And in Christian tradition, he's remembered very differently.
Primarily as the first great persecutor. Tacitus's account of the post-fire brutality became foundational. Later Christian tradition held him responsible for the martyrdoms of the apostles Peter and Paul in Rome.
And some even saw him as the Antichrist.
Yes. This idea appears in some early Christian writings, like the Sibylline Oracles. The belief was that Nero either was the Antichrist, or that the Antichrist would be a returned demonic version of Nero, the Nero Redivivus legend, given a dark, apocalyptic twist.
Is that connected to the number 666?
Many scholars believe so. Using a Hebrew or Greek system called gematria, where letters have numerical values, the name Nero Caesar, Neron Caesar in Hebrew, adds up to 666. So the number of the beast in the book of Revelation could very well be a contemporary coded reference to the emperor who persecuted them.
So looking back at everything, Nero remains this figure of stark, almost baffling contradictions.
Absolutely. You have the Quinquennium Neronis, the sound administration, the peace with Parthia, real achievements, and then you have the matricide, the extravagance, the cruelty, the persecution, the Great Fire controversy.
He's the artist, the performer, the builder, and the tyrant.
It's incredibly difficult to reconcile these aspects. Was he inherently monstrous? Was he corrupted by absolute power? Was he manipulated by those around him? Or was he simply a product of a brutal system?
It really makes you question how history gets written.
It absolutely does. Nero's story is perhaps the ultimate example of how a historical figure's reputation can be shaped and perhaps distorted by later narratives, political agendas, and the sheer passage of time. The sources are biased, the motives are murky.
So the final thought for you, our listeners, might be this. When we look at a figure like Nero, how much are we seeing the person, and how much are we seeing the layers of interpretation built up over centuries?
Exactly. How do we separate the actions from the legends? And what does the enduring fascination with Nero, the tyrant, the artist, the supposed Antichrist, tell us about our own relationship with power, fame, and the stories we tell about the past? It forces you to think critically, not just about Nero, but about how we understand history itself.